Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to be having a second chat with comics creator, artist, author, Tony McMillen. Tony, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime, absolutely. We were just reminiscing about the beauty of Heroes Con, getting to meet in person, and I was able to pick up this book from you in person as well. So always nice to connect outside of Zoom space.
Oh, big time. That's one of the best things is meeting people who I've talked to maybe for years online and actually getting to shake their hand, say hello, and see how tall they are, and see if my estimation was. That's like my big thing. Like, oh, they're so much taller than I thought I would. I have no idea why I think people are certain heights, but I definitely have weird judgments.
Yeah, yeah. What was your read on me? Was I as you expected?
I think so. Actually, I think you were totally as expected. I think the first Heroes Con, everybody was super tall. I was like, "What's going on? Am I
Hmm.
short? I think I'm an average height." But this year, I was pleasantly accepting of everyone's actual heights.
Yes, yes, yes. I always tell students in Zooms that I'm like six something, 6 feet two or something. So,
Right.
uh, but hopefully not too disappointing in person. I hope.
No,
Um,
you were tremendous.
oh, thanks. As were you, as were you.
I appreciate that.
Well, you of course have this very distinctive style. That was going to be what I sort of led into our questions with, because I've seen some of the commissions you've been doing online, some of your visions of classic characters, DC and Marvel characters, and things like that. So, of course, folks out there will also know you for seeing that style in the book Attaboy, which is great.
Thank
Um,
you.
yes, absolutely. So curious how you developed that.
Yeah, I think I've always drawn and the style's mutated and as a 12-year-old boy in the 90s, I was definitely a little McFarlane clone, like wannabe and
Hmm.
these weird crosshatches that didn't mean anything, but I kept trying doing them because I thought that's what you had to do and but I think the big pivotal point was when I start really finding a voice visually was I start using a Pilot Parallel pen, which is a chisel tip pen. It's a flat-ended pen. And I started drawing with that. I really liked it because I basically didn't have to toggle between different tools. I didn't have to use like a crow quill and then use a brush. Just this thing could do everything. Use the big flat end for big marks, and then I could use the corners for fine marks and I started kind of changing the way I drew, and I started drawing sometimes almost in a side to side way, almost like a an old fashioned printing machine. I started
Oh,
doing
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and that really changed. And now I actually, even though I draw with a pencil, I can draw. I sometimes automatically try to draw like I'm drawing parallel, and so it's changed my style. And I think a big thing too was realizing obviously I have a bunch of influences like everyone does, and they cross-pollinate. And I start realizing once in a while when I was drawing, if I found something that's kind of funky and weird, I was like, I don't know exactly what that is. I would pursue that, and I would try to
Hmm.
go
Hmm.
dive deeper into what is that? Why do I draw elbows like that? What does that look like? And that would sort of breed into its own weird thing. And I think that's I think it's a big part of what happened. And another thing which I always talk about is I think I'm a really bad imitator. And so I think a lot of what I'm doing is me trying to look like maybe Frank Miller or John Romita Jr. or Ashley Wood or a million different guys and doing it poorly. And so it kind of becomes its own thing. And so I embrace that. So I think that has led me to having a fairly distinct look about my work, I think.
Love it, love it. Well, I think lots of folks start out imitating. I think about it from the writing side of like I tried to be David Mamet for a while, and then I tried to be Kurt Vonnegut for a while, and in the
Right.
midst of all of those things, you sort of find what works best for you, and some of those people still have a little flavor in there from time to time.
Oh, definitely. And I also have written prose novels and I had the same thing. Like you mentioned Vonnegut, it's a huge thing where I went through a phase where I was trying to be really clever and everything was supposed to be like Breakfast of Champions. And it's like, well, it kind of comes off, I think now, like I was really trying to imitate that. I wasn't really being me, but it's okay to have a little bit of that in you because that's fine. I think everyone's style is in a part, at least a reflection of what you like, what your tastes are. And that's
Yeah.
totally fine.
Yeah. Now, of course, you have both the visual talent as well as the verbal talent to do that. You could totally pull off a of champions sort of mixture between prose and the occasional image the way that he did.
Yeah, I mean, as a 15-year-old kid, I think that was one of my favorite novels, and I realized, oh, he could just draw a picture of an asshole and a weird like. I was like, but it's still literature. I was like, this is great. I love it, and
Yeah.
the story is really profound and really funny. It's a lot of things, but I love the use of illustration within that too.
Yeah, yeah, and he features that in his signature as well, that particular
Yeah.
image. So, yeah. Now, speaking of exploring story, you have Serious Creatures, which is, there's a little nostalgia that's mixed in. There's kind of an interesting slice of life thing happening. So I'm curious about how, because we focused on Attaboy the last time we talked, curious about how that this story evolved.
Well, I think we were talking about literature, Kurt Vonnegut, and so this was
Hmm.
going to be a prose novel initially. I had written, I think, like an 80-page short story, which was kind of a version of this, which Serious Creatures is about a teenage special effects artist working in Hollywood in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's based loosely based on the career of Rob Bottin. Rob worked on Star Wars at age 14. He's one of the players in the Mos Eisley the cantina scene, and he made
Oh.
some masks, and he was a really tall kid. And the story I heard, which I like, really sparked my imagination, was he was 14 on the set of Star Wars. That was his first day on any set, and he's hanging out in between cut takes, and some guy walks up to him and goes, "Hey, you're younger. What do you think? You think this is cool? You think this is gonna work?" And Rob Bottin was like, "I think it's kind of silly, honestly. All these like aliens at a bar. I think people are gonna laugh at this. This is kind of stupid." And the guy's like, okay, cool. And he walked away. And then Rob Bottin's mentor, Rick Baker, was like, hey, what did George want? And Rob's like, who's George? And that was his first day in
Nice.
Hollywood. And Rob Bottin tells the story in like some like DVD special. And I was like, that's amazing. That was like your first day on set with George Lucas. That's so that was like I gotta do a story about some guy who's got a similar trajectory.
Yeah.
But I was going to write it as a novel, and so I wrote the short story version of it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do a novel. And at that time, I had just done Lumen, my first comic book. I had just drawn all 4 issues, and I was like, I really like doing comics. I don't know, maybe I was like, what's cool about special effects is that obviously there's a visual component, and it might be easier to kind of convey some of the interesting parts about special effects with drawings instead of just words. I was like, maybe I'll do a test. So I wrote like 6 pages of as a comic. I drew a 6 page version of Serious Creatures, which is like the first 6 pages of the first issue, and I
Hmm.
loved it. And I realized, oh, I could do all the cool surreal stuff I want to do much easier with a visual format. Like this all lends
Yeah.
itself to a comic book, and then it became a comic book. And what was fun about Serious Creatures was after doing Lumen, Lumen was very action oriented, very superhero-y and stuff like that. I was like, well, the challenge would be Serious Creatures is going to be a lot of conversations, and there'd be some
Hmm.
cool special effects and surreal stuff, but a lot of it's people talking. How do you make that interesting? And I was like, well, I've read comics which have been conversational, and a lot of times they can be good, but sometimes they do get a little stagnant visually. And I was like, some of the Vertigo titles, which I do like, sometimes there's some stuff I'm like, oh man, I wish this artist had a little more panache or did something to break it up. And I
Hmm.
realized like I was like, who has done this well? And I was like, for me, as a teenager and into my 20s, I thought Sam Keith's The Max was a
Yeah.
really good balance between, obviously the Max is a big purple superhero looking guy, but half the book is just him talking to Julie or Sarah and just but Sam Keith makes it interesting. He knows how to make cool angles or make ways that the conversation is reflected in the poses that people are doing. And I was like, he figured out something. So that was my big inspiration about how do I make this work with just people gabbing for like 20 pages.
Hmm.
And I will say too, like after I did Serious Creatures, the first 6 issues, I did Attaboy afterwards because like I gotta do some people fighting again. I gotta do some action because it's too much to do like a whole year of people just talking. And I think it works, but I think most artists do that. I think the next work they do is a complete 180 from what they did previously because you just want to switch it up.
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
yeah, my Serious Creatures, I did the first 6 issues, Attaboy follows, and then I did a couple other little books, and then I did Serious Creatures, and now I'm doing another action book because it's just I gotta balance it out again.
Yeah, yeah, love the creative balance, and no, you've continued the world of Serious Creatures. Is that what, right? This is sort of volume one, but there's a volume two as well.
Yeah, and I'm doing a Kickstarter right now for Volume 2, which I call Reel 2. It's the last six issues, and so that's complete. I released them individually, and now I'm just collecting them. And so now the whole story is done. It's all 12 issues. It's all complete. I'm calling it a low stakes epic
Hmm.
because it's about the rise and fall of practical effects, and also the main character Bobby Feckle, whose career kind of mirrors Rob Bottin, who did Star Wars when he was 14, and eventually at age 21 he did The Thing. He did John Carpenter's The Thing,
Nice.
and that's one of those high watermarks in practical effects. But he was a young guy doing that, and after he did The Thing, he went to the hospital for exhaustion, and the rumors are he might have had a hernia too. Um, or I'm sorry, an ulcer. He lived on set for more than a year just making these effects and doing nothing else, and he was destroyed. But
Mm.
the second half of the story is picks up kind of around that era, and so our main character Bobby Feck was kind of striking out on his own. And even though the book's about, special effects and all this stuff, a lot of it is also about his family issues, him looking for a family with his coworkers, and sort of the found family of like people in Hollywood. So half of the friends are actors. There's some scream queens, there's some stuntmen, there's some directors, there's some special effects guys, and I really like one of my favorite films is Boogie Nights.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what I love Boogie Nights is, yeah, the most of the characters are porn stars, porn actors, but they know all these sort of tangential on this outskirts of Hollywood type of figures, and they all kind of become a weird found family. It's almost like a circus troupe where
Yeah.
they put on a show, but behind the show, there's people are just trying to get mortgages, paid. People are trying to get married. People are just kind of like any family. There's all these kind of kinks, and so the books become that, and like I really enjoyed. You get these characters throughout Serious Creatures. You have like 3 decades with these people, so it's this long view of everyone going up and down in their life. And I got to do like there's a Halloween issue, there's a Thanksgiving issue, there's all these things happen because it's life has all these kind of I don't know milestones or episodes we all know about. But then you also have the cool angle of they also make monster movies. There's also going to be the CGI is coming. The threat of CGI is always on lurking behind them. So. I think it's a really weird, interesting book. I don't know if there's a comic quite like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely enjoyed it. And you have,
Thanks.
as I mentioned, kind of an auteur approach where you're not just doing the story, you're not just doing the kind of the groundwork of the art. There's a lot that you do in the book.
Yeah, thank you. I think part of the I like when cartoonists do that. You had Michel Fiffe on. He's one of my favorite
Hmm.
cartoonists, and
Hmm.
he does everything. And I think that really I think that enhances his work. And Tom Scioli's another guy who just does it all, and I love when he does that. And it's also, I guess, it's easier in a way. I don't have to rely on anybody. I know a lot of people who they're a writer or they're an artist, and they're always waiting for the other guy to give them the part that they need to finish the work. They're waiting for the baton to pass.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I don't have to worry about that at all. I letter it, I color, I do everything. So yeah, it's more work, but it's also I think the product's better, and I think it is an easier process. And I'm with the comics, I'm a bit of a control freak. So again, I don't have to. And the funny thing is, like, even though I am doing it all, there are parts where it feels like when I have to sit down and draw the page I wrote, and there's a lot of dialogue. I'm like, what was I thinking? I'm kind of mad at the writer, even though there's no one to be mad at. It's just me.
Right.
I feel like that happens a lot, and it's kind of funny. I'm like, oh my God, I need to talk to myself more and figure out like, hey, this is gonna suck for you down the line when you do this part or whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm getting better as I go on. But yeah, and Serious Creatures was the first time like Vloom, and I did everything, but with coloring, I think Serious Creatures, the first arc, I start realizing, oh, I like to do I'm doing digital colors, but I like to do
Hmm.
crayons and watercolor brushes and things that resemble analog stuff. And I start figuring out, I think my coloring style a lot more Serious Creatures, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely makes the page sort of stand out in that way. And we've mentioned Paul Thomas Anderson, we've mentioned Vonnegut. Any other creators that are in the mix that have inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, so overall, I think Frank Miller will probably be my always be my biggest inspiration. I was a kid when I got into his stuff, and I love an artist who has a our creator who has a vision, and he seems to have a vision throughout his career. Like I want to do this kind of project, and I really like that. And I think um, Tom Scioli's been like that lately, where I feel like he's going to do a Godzilla book now. I'm like, of course, that'd be great. Like, I could
Hmm.
totally see you doing that. And like, your take will be very interesting. And he's done these like biographical comics about T Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and he's done all these different works. And I kind of like that too. Like Stanley Kubrick, the director, did that too, where he's like, I'm going to do a Western or I'm going to tackle a genre. This will be my version of a horror movie. This will be my version of a war movie. And I'm
Hmm.
like, that's kind of fun to do. And so with Serious Creatures, part of this was like, I love Goodfellas, Boogie Nights. I love these like sort of decades in with a bunch of people who are very specific and weird and what their rise and fall is. I always kind of love that story. And also, and this is really weird, as a kid, I loved the Who's Tommy. And I always thought, man, I'd love to do a story about somebody who has a really unique, weird ability. Like they're good at something. Like he was good at pinball.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I was like, what's my Tommy? What would be a weird thing? And I was like, oh man, special effects. It's very niche. It's very strange. It's very special. And this has sort of been my version of a Tommy, I guess. I've always been wanting to do that kind of story. I think also with Serious Creatures, there's another film. Oh my God, I feel bad. I forgot the director's name. It's a British film called 24-Hour Party People, and
Hmm.
it's a
Hmm.
great film from the early 2000s, and it's basically about Factory Records, which did they made the Joy Division's first records and a few other kind of post-punk records, and then eventually they did the first techno records, and it stars Stephen Coogan
Hmm. Hmm.
as a guy. His name. Sorry, one sec. It's in my throat. But he's a guy named Tony who is his day job is he's an anchorman for some British BBC he has like people on a music show, and his night job is he runs this record label, and it's just full of like drugs and funny stuff, and it's very breaking the fourth wall. He talks to the camera a lot, and it's pure mayhem. It's so much fun, and I love like again, it's like 3 decades in a very particular group of people, and they become like these little found families where people are just, and a lot of times people are kind of repeating the mistakes with their own family. And that's what happens in Serious Creatures, where you have a problem with your mom, and eventually you find somebody to be your new mother figure, and then the same problems persist because
Hmm.
half of
Hmm.
it is you are choosing somebody like them, maybe like your actual mother. Another half is you are bringing problems to this already, so you are repeating things, and it's always fascinating. It's kind of tragic, but it happens a lot in life. And in Serious Creatures, it was a good opportunity because I didn't have a lot of characters who were like, wearing capes and fighting mushroom monsters or being little robots to actually talk about some more mundane things, which I think are interesting. And like, there's the book's very autobiographical, even though it's obviously not my life. And like a perfect example is the first issue of Serious Creatures. The main character, Bobby Feckles, I think he's 14. He's got a famous Monsters magazine he holds around with him all the time. He loves this magazine. His
Hmm.
older sister, Lainey, is going to she at the end of the issue, she's going to stay back and they're in New England and he's going to go back to home to Arizona. She's had a fight with their mom. She's not going to go home. She's going to stay with their aunt. She's going to move away. And so Bobby's, he's very sad and not sure how to talk about this. And so she's going to drive him to the airport. He gets out of the car. He leaves the magazine behind. And Lainey, the character, sister character, she's crying. She's, oh, you idiot, you left your magazine. You love this. And so she grabs it. He runs after her. Hey, stupid, you left your magazine. He goes, no, I left that for you. She says, what?
Yeah.
And he's like, this way, I'll get it back from you someday. I know we'll meet again. And she's very touched by this. So in real life, that was me and my sister, but it was Spawn number one.
Oh, love it. Love it.
Yeah, that's, it's like 93 or something. That was my most treasured thing. And I gave it to her and she's like, and she knew what it meant to me. And she's like overwhelmed. I was like, my sister is going to live in Ohio and I was going to live in Arizona. I was like, hey, I'll get it back from you. I don't know if it's gonna be a couple of years or what, but don't worry. We'll see each other. It's gonna be okay. And throughout the book Serious Creatures, there's all these little moments where I find ways to kind of mask what happened to me or what I felt through these characters. And the guy's a mask maker, so it kind of lent itself to the theme of what are masks? Why do we make masks? What are masks for? And there's a lot of that throughout the series, I think.
Love that. I love that. And I love how parts of your life sort of inform it and love to hear the stories of what inspires moments like that.
Yeah, I think that stuff's always interesting, and even especially when it's really you wouldn't expect it. Like when you find out like a Jack Kirby comic about, it's like, oh, actually in World War II, something kind of like that happened to him, and then he made it so
Yeah.
Captain America and the Falcon did this or whatever. It's just like, oh, interesting. I
Hmm.
love that those weird things. It's like, there's like an evil blind bad guy. It's like, well, actually his uncle who's blind is really mean to him. So actually that's why, this guy is like that. It's just stuff like that. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Love the artistic and the writing process that way. Love that. So speaking of process, what is next for you? You said you like to move back and forth between types of stories. So anything that's currently gestating that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm doing a sequel to my first comic book which was called Lumen, and this is gonna be called Destroying Angel Lumen. And my idea was like, I love Road Warrior,
Hmm.
and I love
Hmm.
Evil Dead too. And what as a kid, I was always like, wait a minute, they're kind of like they're sequels, but they're basically remakes. They're like I saw those ones first, and I didn't even need to see the first one because they kind of just redo that, or you can just kind of start over. And I was like, I want to do that with Lumen. I feel like I've grown as a cartoonist. This will still, if you read the first Lumen, don't worry, that stuff still happened. But this is sort of a new starting point, and I want to take it to like the next level. And so, Destroying Angel Lumen is this super action-packed story, and the idea is in Lumen, the main character's name is Esteban Vela, and he lives in a world of endless night. It's called the Noctera. Uh, there's never daylight, and there's all these mushroom monsters, and he has a special suit which runs on lumen, and lumen is a sort of a algae that grows on the land, which is bioluminescent, and it's like the one source of heat, and it can grow plants, and it also can fuel his suit, and he has a lantern, and he fights these creatures, and it's really almost like I've been saying, like H.R. Giger meets Adventure Time, really weird.
Oh, nice,
And
nice.
this new story, it's full throttle action. He meets this new adversary called the Destroying Angel, who is like this really weird biomechanical, uh, red and black, like demonic figure who looks almost like he looks like the sinew armor from Bram Stoker's Dracula, kind of, which
Hmm.
I always thought was
Hmm.
cool.
Hmm.
That meets I guess from Legend, Tim Curry's Darkness, the huge horns.
Yeah, yeah.
And even the Batmobile from the old 60s Batman with his black and red, he looks like all those things, like, and maybe some Sid Mead, cool, like sexy, like curvy design. Anyways, he's really fun to draw. He's really crazy. And so that's the next book. I'm like, it's gonna be 4 issues. They're all gonna be 48 pages each. I've done the first issue. I'm gonna wait till I get them all done, and then I'm gonna release them all. Um, but it's been really cool to revisit that world and just do something like there's tons of like just like 13 pages of no dialogue, just all action, and that's really fun to do after serious creatures, which get a little wordy.
Hmm.
But the thing I'm working on, like, so I always got things on the back burner, and I'll know when it's time to do them, I think. But the thing I'm really excited about too, besides this, is eventually I was thinking about Attaboy and how it was cool to do a book which is a very weird format in a different kind of different way, like a different way of telling a story. I was like, I want to do that kind of again, and I've always thought it'd be cool. I'll think of an idea when it feels right and organic. I'll come up with something like that, and I kind of did. An idea is going to be I love like the Alex Toth books, which show his animation work. And I
Hmm.
love the
Hmm.
collections they have of Kirby's animation pitches. He would just draw a couple pages of all these crazy designs, and there'd be sometimes comics within them, but usually they're just characters kind of bunched together and little explanations. And I would love to do a book which would be about a fictional cartoonist who goes to work for a animation company, and this is a collection of his crazy ass pitches, and it tells a story. And I'm thinking about calling it The Unsold Izzy Spinoza. And
Nice.
yeah, I think that'd be fun. And like it eventually will tell kind of a surreal story that will sort of mimic what happened to the guy's career. And he'll be a little bit of Ditko, a little bit of Toth, a little bit of Kirby. And you'll see all these. I usually have a bunch of weird ideas, which I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever make these into a book. And so I can kind of throw them into this. But I can also tell an overarching story, which will kind of explain where this cartoonist guy was coming from. He got screwed over in the 60s, and now he's kind of trying to figure out what his next move is. And so I think that'll be the next really crazy book I do, where it'll come out like it'll look like it's a collection, like it'll look like a collection of some famous artists, but you read it and you go, oh, this is actually a story. It's just told in a really weird format. That's the idea. I haven't drawn a single page of it yet, but that's the dream.
That's a very cool idea. I would be on board
Thanks.
for reading that.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
man. I
Yeah.
think so. I think it'd be cool. I haven't heard anything like that. And again, I have all these weird ideas which are like they're good enough for 2 pages, and I can collect those and put them together and make it kind of fun, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to hear more about that and would love to see it in production.
Thanks, man. Yeah, in probably a couple of years, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I'm a listener out there and I want to know more, if I want to support serious creatures or otherwise see your work, where would be the best places for me to do that?
Yeah, Serious Creatures Real 2, the Kickstart is live now. So if you go to kickstarter.com, look up Serious Creatures or look up Tony McMillen, you'll find it. But also, I mean, the good news is my name is no one's has my name apparently. So if you look up Tony McMillen at anything on Instagram, Facebook, anything, you don't have to add any numbers. It's just Tony McMillen. And I got all those things locked down. You can buy Attaboy any store if you can get ordered anywhere across the world. I got a guy in Australia who tagged me. They're reading
Nice.
in Australia. It's amazing. I love it. Yeah, please find me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. All those things. I'm always posting drawings and commissions and this stuff, process stuff. So, yeah, please do.
Awesome, awesome. Did we miss anything in the talk through that you want to make sure to share before we close out and hopefully do a third chat at some point?
I'm down to come back. It'd be great. But I know we covered it all, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, anytime. And I'm sure I will see you at a convention again sometime soon, and always interested to check out what you're working on.
Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks so much.